Admiral Kang Hyun stood on the bridge of his flagship watching the last hope of 7 species fade into the darkness of space around Viridian Prime. The massive view screen showed what remained of the Kithara defense fleet scattered across the dying star system like broken toys after a child's tantrum. 300 ships had become 30 in the past week, and those 30 would be gone within hours. The communication panel crackled with desperate voices speaking in different alien languages, but all saying the same thing. They were running out of time, ammunition, and hope. Captain Park Nari's crystalline form shimmered with fear colors as she reported from her Zephyrite cruiser that her weapons were down to emergency reserves. Commander Lee Day clicked his mandibles nervously as his insectoid crew prepared their final defensive positions around the refugee transports. The Dominion Empire had swept through 63 star systems, like a plague consuming everything in its path. Their massive dreadnoughts, each the size of small cities, moved through space with terrible purpose. Overlord Vextar's philosophy was brutally simple: submit completely or face total extinction. There was no negotiation, no mercy, no middle ground. Kang Hyun had been fighting the Dominion for 2 years now and had watched entire civilizations burn. The green forests of Altair 7 had become ash under Dominion bombardment. The crystal cities of SciFiPrime lay in ruins, their beautiful harmonic spires silenced forever. The hive worlds of Thraxia had been stripped bare, their billions of inhabitants either dead or enslaved. Behind the thin line of defending ships floated the last refugee convoy. 5 million civilians from a dozen different species packed into cargo haulers and passenger liners never designed for war zones. Families who had lost everything except their lives huddled together in ships that leaked air and barely had enough power to maintain life support. The tactical display showed red contacts appearing at the edge of the system. 50 Dominion dreadnoughts emerged from hyperspace with weapon ports already glowing. Behind them came hundreds of escort ships and troop transports. Vextar himself commanded from the massive flagship Eternal Dominion, a vessel so large it had its own artificial gravity and contained entire cities within its armored hull. Kang Hyun opened a channel to his remaining captains. His voice stayed calm even though his hearts were beating fast with fear. Every species in the coalition had different biology, but they all understood desperation. Park Nari's crystals flickered with resignation, while Lee Day's antennae twitched with barely contained aggression. "This is our final stand," Kang Hyun said into his communicator. "The Galactic Council has abandoned us. No reinforcements are coming. The core worlds have decided to sacrifice the outer rim to buy themselves time. We are alone." The words hurt to speak, but they needed to be said. 3 days ago, the last message from the Council had made it clear. The central governments would not risk their fleets to save the frontier territories. They would build their defenses around the established systems and let the outer colonies fall to the Dominion. Advance Captain Kim Tae from Intelligence had brought the final proof. Encrypted communications showed the core worlds were already negotiating surrender terms with Vextar. They planned to offer the outer rim as tribute in exchange for their own safety. Entire species would be sacrificed to buy a few more years of peace for the established powers. "Sir?" Park Nari's voice came through the comm with its strange musical quality. "My sensors detect the Dominion fleet beginning attack formation. They will reach the refugee convoy in approximately 4 hours." Lee Day added his own report. "My scouts confirm enemy troop transports are moving to boarding positions. They intend to take prisoners for their slave markets." Kang Hyun closed his eyes for a moment and thought about his own family. His mate and offspring had been evacuated from Altair Prime months ago, but he had no idea if they were even still alive. The refugee networks had broken down as systems fell one after another. Millions of beings were scattered across space with no way to find their loved ones. "All ships assume defensive formation around the convoy," he ordered. "We cannot stop them, but we can make them pay for every life they take." The 30 remaining ships of the coalition moved into position. Altarian destroyers with their powerful plasma cannons took point positions. Zephyrite cruisers used their crystal technology to create defensive shields. Thraxian fighters swarmed around the larger ships like angry insects protecting their hive. The Dominion fleet approached with mechanical precision. Their weapons began charging with an ominous glow, visible even at this distance. Vextar's voice boomed across all communication frequencies, speaking in the universal trade language, primitive species of the Kythera Coalition. The Overlord's words carried contempt and absolute certainty. Your resistance ends now. Surrender your ships and populations to the Dominion Empire. Those who comply will be granted the privilege of serving the superior civilization. Those who resist will face complete annihilation. Kang Hyun looked around his bridge at the faces of his crew, Altarians with their blue skin and large eyes. They had been explorers once, mapping new star systems and making contact with other species. Now they fought desperately just to survive. He thought about all the species that had already fallen to Dominion expansion. The Peaceful Harmony Collective had tried to negotiate and been enslaved within days. The proud warrior clans of Rigel had fought bravely and been exterminated to the last individual. The ancient archive keepers of Vega had tried to hide their knowledge and watched their libraries burn. This is Admiral Kang Hyun of the Kythera Defense Fleet, he responded to Vextar's demand. We do not surrender. We do not submit. We will fight for every life in our care until our last breath. The Dominion response was immediate. Energy beams lanced across space, striking the coalition formation. Shields flared and failed. The destroyer, Altair's Pride, exploded in brilliant fire, taking 200 crew members with it. The Zephyrite cruiser. Harmonic Echo lost its crystal matrix and went dark, drifting powerlessly. But something strange happened as Kang Hyun prepared to give the order for a final desperate charge. His communications officer suddenly looked up from her station with surprise and confusion on her face. Admiral, she said with uncertainty. We are receiving a response to our general distress beacon, source unknown. Signal is coming from the edge of charted space. Kang Hyun frowned. They had been broadcasting emergency signals for weeks without any response except automated replies from distant trading posts offering condolences. No one wanted to risk Dominion retaliation by helping the coalition. What kind of response, he asked. His officer checked her readings twice before answering. The signal is very weak, sir. It appears to originate from a region marked as restricted in our star charts. The old archives listed as quarantine zone designation Sol System Park. Nari's crystal form suddenly shifted to colors of ancient fear. Even Li Day's mandibles clicked in recognition. Every species had legends about the Sol quarantine. 10,000 years ago, something had happened there during the Great War against the Precursors. The official records were classified or destroyed, but the stories remained. What does the message say? Kang Hyun demanded. His communications officer looked at him with wide eyes full of hope and terror in equal measure. Sir, the message is very simple. It says help is coming and we should hold the line. The bridge fell silent except for the sounds of distant explosions as the Dominion fleet continued its advance. Everyone stared at the tactical display showing their hopeless situation. 30 ships against hundreds. No reinforcements, no escape, no miracles. But somewhere in the darkness beyond known space, something had answered their call. Something from the forbidden zone where ancient powers were said to sleep. Something that might be their salvation or their doom. The message from the Sol system changed everything and nothing at the same time. Admiral Kang Hyun still watched his fleet die ship by ship as the Dominion forces closed the distance. But now there was something else in the darkness. Something that had been sleeping for 10,000 years and was finally stirring. Captain Park Nari worked frantically at her sensor array, trying to detect any sign of incoming help. Her crystalline fingers moved across controls that most other species could not even see, but her advanced detection systems found only empty space. The quarantine barriers around Sol were still intact according to her readings. Nothing had emerged. From that forbidden region of space, I am detecting massive energy signatures building along the Sol perimeter. She reported to the Coalition command frequency. Whatever sent that message is still behind the quarantine walls. But sir, the energy readings are unlike anything in our databases. Commander Li Day added his own disturbing intelligence from the forward scout positions. My fastest interceptors report strange distortions in space-time fabric near the outer system boundary. Something is moving out there, but it does not follow normal physics. My pilots describe it as reality bending like heated metal. Captain Kim Tae had been working with the classified archives trying to find any useful information about the Sol quarantine. What she discovered made her question everything she thought she knew about galactic history. The official records claimed Sol was the home system of a species called humans, who had fought in the Precursor War and been destroyed along with their enemies. But the deeper files told a different story. The humans had not been victims of the Precursor War. They had ended it. When the ancient enemy threatened to consume all life in the galaxy, the humans had made a choice that changed their very nature. They became something beyond normal understanding and then voluntarily imprisoned themselves to prevent their transformation from affecting other species. Admiral. Kim Tae's voice carried fear and wonder as she shared her findings. The quarantine around Sol was not imposed by the Galactic Council. It was requested by the humans themselves. They sealed their system to protect us from what they had become. The tactical situation grew worse as the Dominion fleet moved into attack range. Energy beams and kinetic missiles began striking the Coalition formation with devastating effect. The Thraxian battlecruiser Hiveguard lost its forward sections and began leaking atmosphere. Zephyrite fighters exploded in brilliant flashes as Dominion interceptors overwhelmed their crystal hulls. Overlord Vextar opened another communication channel. His massive form filled the view screen, radiating cruel satisfaction. The Dominion leader's body was a mixture of organic tissue and mechanical augmentation that made him appear more machine than living being. His empire had conquered so many systems that he incorporated technology from each victory into his own form. Your pathetic resistance amuses me. Vextar spoke with the confidence of someone who had never known defeat. Did you truly believe that ancient myths and legends would save you? The Sol quarantine exists because that system is dead. Nothing lives there but radiation and empty space. But even as the Overlord spoke his certainty, something unprecedented happened. Every sensor array in the Coalition fleet registered the same impossible reading. Space itself was beginning to warp and twist at the edge of the system. Not hyperspace distortions or warp field fluctuations, but actual reality bending, as if the universe was being reshaped by an intelligence beyond comprehension. Park Nari's crystals shifted through colors that had no names as her instruments tried to process what they were detecting. Admiral, the barrier around Sol is fluctuating. Something is testing its integrity from the inside. The energy levels are increasing exponentially. Lee Day's mandibles clicked rapidly as his tactical officers reported similar readings. Sir, my weapons specialists cannot identify the energy signature. It does not match any known technology. It appears to be manipulating fundamental forces we do not understand. The refugee convoy behind them continued broadcasting desperate pleas for evacuation. 5 million beings from dozens of species crowded into ships, never meant for extended space travel. Families separated by the chaos of war. Children who had never known anything but running from the Dominion advance. Elderly beings who remembered when the galaxy was at peace. Kang Hyun made a decision that would haunt him for the rest of his life. He ordered all remaining ships to form a defensive sphere around the convoy. They would not run. They would not surrender. They would buy time for whatever was coming from Sol to reach them, or they would die trying. The Altarian destroyer New Dawn took a direct hit from a Dominion dreadnought and broke apart in a shower of debris and escaping atmosphere. Captain Min. Kai had served with Kang Hyun for 15 years. They had explored nebulae together and made first contact with 3 different species. Now Min Ki was gone, and his crew with him. The Zephyrate cruiser Crystal Song used its harmonic resonance to create a defensive barrier around 2 refugee transports. The barrier held for exactly 47 seconds before Dominion plasma cannons overwhelmed the crystal matrix. Captain Yu Wei tried to maintain the shield until the last moment. Her crystalline form shattered like glass, but her sacrifice saved. 8,000 civilians. Commander Lee Day's fighters swarmed around a Dominion troop transport, preventing it from reaching the refugee ships. His pilots flew their insects like extensions of their own bodies, diving and weaving through defensive fire. They destroyed the transport, but lost half their number in the process. The message from Sol came again, but this time it was different. Instead of simple words, there was something else in the signal. A presence that touched the minds of every coalition member simultaneously. It was ancient and patient and carried the weight of unimaginable time. When it spoke, each being heard, it in their own language and understood meanings that went beyond words. "We have been watching," the presence said without sound or vibration. "We have been waiting for a threat sufficient to justify our return. The Dominion Empire has become that threat. Hold your positions. Do not despair. We remember what it means to protect those who cannot protect themselves." Captain Kim Tae's intelligence files suddenly came alive with new data. Information that had been sealed for millennia began decrypting itself as if the Soul Presence was providing the keys. What she read made her question everything she thought she knew about the nature of existence itself. Humans had not simply fought the precursors. They had realized that conventional warfare could never defeat an enemy that consumed entire galaxies. So they had chosen transformation. They had evolved beyond the limitations of normal matter and energy. They had become something that existed partially outside regular spacetime. The process had changed them in ways that made them dangerous to other species. Their very presence could affect reality around them. Their thoughts could reshape matter. Their emotions could create or destroy on a cosmic scale. So they had built the quarantine barriers and withdrawn from galactic civilization to prevent accidental harm to others, but they had never stopped watching. For 10,000 years they had monitored galactic events waiting for another threat like the precursors. The Dominion Empire, with its endless expansion and consumption of entire populations, had finally triggered their ancient protective instincts. The space around Sol continued to distort as something massive prepared to emerge from the quarantine zone. Reality bent and twisted as forces beyond normal physics pressed against the barriers that had contained them for millennia. The Coalition fleet detected energy signatures that made their instruments scream warnings about impossible readings. Overlord Vextar noticed the distortions and directed a portion of his fleet toward the source. 50 Dominion ships broke formation and moved toward the edge of the system, ready to investigate this new development. Their weapons powered up and shields strengthened in preparation for whatever was coming. Unknown contact approaching from restricted coordinates. The Dominion tactical officer reported with mechanical precision. Energy signature does not match any known technology. Recommend immediate investigation and neutralization. Vextar studied the sensor data with growing concern. His empire had conquered dozens of species and absorbed their technology. His databases contained information about every known starship design and weapon system, but this new contact registered as something completely outside his experience. "Prepare the fleet for engagement with unknown hostiles," he ordered. "If this is some primitive attempt at rescue, it will be crushed like all the others. Nothing in this galaxy can stand against Dominion might." But even as he spoke those words, something deep in his augmented consciousness whispered warnings. The ancient files contained references to powers that had existed before the current galactic civilization, forces that had shaped the very structure of space and time, legends that even the Dominion's vast databases treated with respect and fear. The barriers around Sol began to fail. Reality tore open like fabric being cut with a knife. Not the smooth transition of hyperspace travel or the controlled distortion of warp fields, but an actual ripping of the universe itself. Space folded in ways that hurt to look at, while dimensions that should not exist pressed into normal reality with terrible purpose. The human dreadnought Indomitable emerged from the wound in space-time like some ancient god awakening from eternal sleep. Its hull was black as the void between stars, but seemed to absorb light rather than simply reflecting nothing. The ship was massive beyond anything the Coalition had ever seen, but size was not what made it terrifying. The vessel existed wrong. Sensors could not get consistent readings because parts of it seemed to phase in and out of normal space. The hull showed scars from battles fought across geological ages. Weapons that could crack planets had left their marks. Energy discharges that could sterilize star systems had burned patterns into its armor. This ship had seen the birth and death of civilizations. Captain Cho Min stood on the bridge surrounded by his crew and felt the weight of 10,000 years of isolation lifting from his shoulders. His body appeared human, but was wrong in subtle ways that made other species uncomfortable without understanding why. His eyes held depths that spoke of watching stars die and being born again. When he moved, space seemed to bend slightly around. His crew shared the same unsettling presence. Navigator Yu-Jin plotted courses through dimensions that did not appear on any star chart. Tactical Officer Han Sol operated weapons that manipulated the fundamental forces of reality. Communications Specialist Nam Ki spoke with beings across impossible distances, without using any technology other species could detect or understand. The Dominion fleet immediately turned their attention to this new threat. Overlord Vextar himself appeared on the communication channels demanding identification and immediate surrender. His mechanical voice carried the authority of someone who had never been refused or challenged successfully. Unknown vessel, you are intruding in Dominion space during military operations. Vextar's image filled screens throughout the system. Identify yourself immediately and prepare to be boarded for inspection. Resistance will result in immediate destruction. Cho Min activated his own communication system and his response reached every ship in the system simultaneously. His voice carried harmonics that touched something deep in the consciousness of every living being. When he spoke, each listener understood not just his words, but the emotions and intentions behind them. This is Captain Cho Min of the Human Deep Void Fleet, he said with the calm certainty of someone who had faced cosmic horrors and survived. You have threatened civilian populations. You have murdered innocents. You have chosen to follow the same path as the precursors. This ends now. The mention of humans sent shockwaves through both fleets. Every species had legends about the mysterious inhabitants of Sol. Ancient stories spoke of beings who could reshape reality with their thoughts and had voluntarily exiled themselves to protect others from their power. Most considered these tales to be mythology. Mixed with propaganda, Vextar's databases immediately accessed all available information about human capabilities. What he found made his augmented systems race with calculations and probabilities. The files were mostly classified or corrupted, but what remained spoke of technologies that violated known physics and weapons that could unmake matter at the quantum level impossible. The Overlord transmitted with mechanical certainty. Humans are extinct. Sol system was sterilized during the precursor conflict. You are attempting to deceive the Dominion with ancient myths and fabricated legends. Cho Min's response was to demonstrate exactly what 10,000 years of evolution and technological development could accomplish. The Indomitable did not fire conventional weapons. Instead, it reached out with forces that existed beyond normal space-time and began reshaping reality around the Dominion fleet. The closest Dominion dreadnought simply ceased to exist, not destroyed by explosive force or consumed by energy beams, but edited out of reality as if it had never been built. The massive warship was there one moment and gone the next, leaving only confused sensor readings and the shocked memories of those who had witnessed its removal. A second dreadnought aged rapidly as temporal fields accelerated its personal timeline. Millennia passed in seconds as the ship's hull corroded and its systems failed from entropy. The crew inside experienced their entire lifespans in moments before crumbling to dust. The vessel became an ancient wreck in the space of a heartbeat. 3 more Dominion ships found themselves trapped in gravity wells that compressed their hulls into perfect spheres of superdense matter. Their crews had no time to scream as the laws of physics were rewritten around them. The spheres collapsed further, becoming tiny black holes that evaporated in flashes of Hawking radiation. Admiral Kang Hyun watched from his flagship as the most powerful military force in known galactic history was systematically dismantled by a single human vessel. His sensors could not explain what was happening, because the technologies being used operated on principles that had no names or mathematical descriptions. Captain Park Nari's crystalline form shifted through colors of awe and terror as her advanced detection systems tried to process the impossible readings. Admiral, the human ship is manipulating space-time at the quantum level. It is rewriting the fundamental constants of physics in localized areas. This should not be possible according to any known science. Commander Lee Day's mandibles clicked rapidly as his tactical officers reported weapon signatures that made no sense. Sir, my instruments detect the Indomitable is not firing energy or projectiles. It appears to be using reality itself as a weapon. This is beyond anything in our databases or theoretical models. The Dominion fleet attempted to respond with concentrated, fire from their remaining ships. Hundreds of plasma cannons and kinetic missiles struck the human vessel simultaneously. The combined firepower was enough to crack continents and boil oceans. Against the Indomitable, it had no effect whatsoever. The attack simply ceased to exist when they approached the human ship, not absorbed by shields or deflected by armor, but removed from reality as if they had never been fired. The weapon struck a boundary around the vessel and vanished, leaving no energy signature or debris. Overlord Vextar realized with growing horror that his empire faced something completely outside his understanding. His augmented mind processed thousands of scenarios and contingencies but found no solution. The humans possessed capabilities that rendered all conventional military doctrine meaningless. All ships focus fire on the unknown vessel, he commanded with desperate authority. Concentrate maximum firepower on a single point. Nothing can withstand the combined might of the Dominion fleet. The remaining dreadnoughts obeyed their leader's orders and unleashed devastation that could have destroyed entire star systems. The space around the Indomitable filled with enough destructive energy to sterilize planets. Reality itself seemed to scream under the assault as physics strained to contain such massive forces. Cho Min watched the display with sad resignation. He remembered when his species had been like these aggressors, proud and certain of their superiority, convinced that military might could solve any problem. The precursor war had taught humanity the futility of such thinking and the price of unchecked expansion. "End this," he said quietly to his tactical officer. Han Sol nodded and activated weapon systems that had no names in any language. The Indomitable reached out across space and touched each Dominion ship with forces that bypassed all defenses, not destroying them, but changing them at the molecular level. Aggressive impulses were neutralized. Violent tendencies were removed. Hostile intentions simply ceased to exist. One by one, the Dominion vessels stopped firing. Their crews looked around, in confusion as bloodlust and conquest drive faded from their minds. They remembered their orders and their mission, but could not understand why they had ever thought such actions were acceptable. The empire that had terrorized 63 star systems began to question its own existence. Vextar felt the change spreading through his fleet and realized what was happening. The humans were not just defeating his forces, they were changing their very nature, removing the aggression and dominance programming that formed the core of Dominion identity. His empire was being dissolved not through destruction, but through transformation. "What are you?" he transmitted with desperate need to understand. Cho Min's response carried the weight of geological time and cosmic responsibility. "We are what your species might become given enough necessity and time. We are evolution's answer to threats that conventional force cannot address. But we are still in our hearts, the children who looked up at stars and dreamed of meeting neighbors among them." The immediate threat had ended, but the implications were just beginning. Admiral Kang Hyun stared at his tactical display showing the transformed Dominion fleet drifting peacefully through space like sleeping giants. Their weapons were powered down. Their aggressive formations had dissolved into random patterns. The most feared military force in the galaxy had become as harmless as merchant vessels. Captain Cho Min's voice reached the coalition flagship without using any communication technology that sensors could detect. His words appeared directly in the minds of everyone on the bridge, carrying meanings beyond simple language. "Admiral Kang Hyun, I request permission to come aboard your vessel. We need to discuss the situation that has developed," Kang Hyun felt, his crew tense with fear and anticipation. Meeting beings of such power could be either salvation or doom for their species. But they had no choice. The humans had saved them from certain destruction and deserved a response to their request. "Permission granted, Captain Cho Min," he replied formally. "How do you wish to transfer to our ship?" The answer came not in words, but in action. Reality shimmered on the bridge of the coalition flagship, and suddenly the human captain stood among them. No transporter beam or shuttlecraft had been used. He had simply appeared, as if the distance between ships meant nothing to someone of his capabilities. Cho Min appeared human at first glance, but wrongness became apparent with closer observation. His proportions were slightly off, as if his body existed in more dimensions than normal space could properly display. His eyes held depths that spoke of watching the birth and death of galaxies. When he moved, the air around him seemed to bend, as if space itself was more flexible in his presence. The bridge crew stepped back instinctively as something deep in their evolution warned them they were in the presence of a force beyond their comprehension. Captain Parknari's crystalline form shifted through colors that had no names, while Commander Lee Day's mandibles clicked nervously as his insect instincts screamed warnings about a predator that existed outside normal classifications. "Please, do not fear me," Cho Min said with genuine sadness in his voice. "I know my presence is disturbing to your species, but I mean no harm. We have spent 10,000 years learning to control what we have become. You are safe." Admiral Kang Hyun stepped forward, despite every instinct telling him to run. His duty as fleet commander required him to face whatever threats or opportunities arose. "Captain Cho Min, we are grateful for your intervention, but we need to understand what has happened here. What are humans now, and why did you remain hidden for so long?" The human captain looked around the bridge, studying each face with eyes that seemed to see into their souls. When he spoke, his words carried the weight of cosmic time and terrible knowledge gained through necessity rather than choice. "We were much like your species once," he began. "Explorers and dreamers who reached for the stars with hope and curiosity. We made contact with other civilizations and joined the galactic community with enthusiasm for what we might accomplish together." He paused, and something ancient and painful moved across his features. Then came the precursors, an intelligence so alien that communication was impossible. They consumed entire star systems not for resources but for the experience of ending life. They turned civilizations against each other for entertainment. They reshaped reality to maximize suffering across the galaxy. Parknari's harmonic voice carried confusion and fear as she asked, "The official records state that humans fought in the Precursor War and were destroyed along with the enemy. What really happened?" Cho Min's response made everyone on the bridge question everything they thought they knew about galactic history. "We realized that conventional warfare could never defeat such beings. Military technology, no matter how advanced, could not touch entities that existed partially outside normal reality. So we made a choice that changed our very nature." He gestured, and the air around him shimmered, showing images that hurt to perceive directly. Scenes of transformation that bypassed optical nerves and appeared directly in the observers' minds. Humans changing at the cellular and quantum level as they evolved beyond the limitations of normal matter and energy. "We became something that could fight the precursors on equal terms," he continued. "We learned to manipulate space-time and probability. We developed the ability to exist in multiple dimensions simultaneously. We gained power over the fundamental forces that shape reality." Commander Lee Day's tactical mind grasped the implications immediately. "You won the war, but at the cost of becoming something dangerous to other species." "Precisely," Cho Min confirmed with approval for the commander's insight. "Our transformed state made us hazardous to normal life. Our thoughts could accidentally reshape matter. Our emotions could create or destroy on a planetary scale. Our very presence could affect the laws of physics in ways that would harm others." Captain Kim Tae from Intelligence had been analyzing her files during the conversation. What she discovered made her voice shake as she shared her findings. The quarantine barriers around Sol were not imposed by the Galactic Council. They were created by humanity to protect the galaxy from what you had become. "We built our own prison," Cho Min agreed sadly. "We sealed ourselves away from the civilizations we had fought to protect. For 10,000 years we watched from behind barriers that kept our dangerous nature contained. We saw species rise and fall. We witnessed wars and peace treaties and the slow development of galactic civilization." The question that had been building in everyone's minds finally emerged from Admiral Kang Hyun's lips. "Why did you emerge now? What made the Dominion threat sufficient to break your self-imposed exile?" The human captain's expression grew dark with cosmic anger and ancient protective instincts. "Because Vextar and his empire were following the same path as the precursors. consuming entire populations for their own expansion, treating other species as resources to be harvested rather than beings with value. The Dominion had become what we sacrificed ourselves to prevent. He moved to the main display and with a gesture that defied physics, showed them images from across Dominion space. 63 conquered systems where billions had died or been enslaved. Civilizations reduced to raw materials for the Empire's growth. Entire species erased from existence to feed the Overlord's hunger for power. We have been monitoring galactic events for millennia, waiting for a threat large enough to justify our return, Chomin explained. The Dominion Empire triggered our ancient protective protocols. We could not remain in isolation while another precursor-level threat consumed the galaxy. Park Nari's crystalline form shimmered with realization and new fear. You said you removed the aggression from the Dominion forces. What exactly did you do to them? The human captain's response carried implications that would reshape galactic civilization. We performed what we call correction. The violent impulses and dominance programming that drove their expansion has been carefully removed from their consciousness. They retain their memories and knowledge but can no longer comprehend why they ever thought conquest and subjugation were acceptable behaviors. Li Day clicked his mandibles as he processed this information. You changed their fundamental nature without destroying them. This is beyond any technology in our understanding. It is the humane solution to dealing with aggressive civilizations, Cho Min replied. Destruction creates martyrs and generates cycles of revenge. Transformation addresses the root cause of the problem and allows former enemies to become productive members of galactic society. The implications hit everyone on the bridge simultaneously. If humans possessed the power to reshape the consciousness of entire species, then they could theoretically do the same thing to the coalition forces or any other civilization that displeased them. The beings who had saved them were potentially more dangerous than the empire they had defeated. Cho Min sensed their fear and addressed it directly. You are wondering if we will do the same thing to your species. You are concerned that our power makes us a threat to your freedom and independence. These are reasonable fears given what you have witnessed. He looked each of them in the eyes with an expression of infinite sadness and cosmic loneliness. This is why we remained in exile for 10,000 years. This is why we sealed ourselves, away from the civilizations we fought to protect. Our power makes others afraid even when we use it to help them. We have become the guardians that everyone needs but no one wants. The transformation of the Dominion Empire happened across 63 star systems in a single day. Human ships appeared simultaneously throughout former Dominion space, not with weapons ready for battle but with healing technology to repair the damage that centuries of conquest had caused. The empire that had terrorized the galaxy became a confused collection of worlds, wondering why they had ever thought violence was acceptable. Admiral Kang Hyun received reports from across the affected systems as the scope of human intervention became clear. Slave camps were opened and prisoners freed. Planetary bombardment ceased immediately as former Dominion commanders looked at their weapons with horror and confusion. Troop transports changed course to return captured populations to their home. World's Captain Park Nari worked with her crystal technology to monitor the communication networks throughout former Dominion territory. Her harmonic analysis revealed something unprecedented in galactic history. Admiral, the change is complete and apparently permanent. Former Dominion citizens are actively working to repair the damage their empire caused. They retain all their memories but seem unable to understand their previous motivations. Commander Li Day added his own tactical assessment. My scouts report that Dominion military formations are dissolving peacefully. Crews are abandoning their warships to return home to families they had not seen in years. The entire military structure is collapsing but without violence or chaos. The most dramatic change occurred aboard the Eternal Dominion itself. Overlord Vextar sat in his command throne surrounded by officers and crew who no longer recognized his authority. The augmented systems that had enhanced his intelligence and extended his life still functioned, but the driving ambition that had created his empire was simply gone. When he tried to give orders, his crew looked at him with confusion and something approaching pity. How had they ever believed that one being had the right to rule over billions of others? What had made them think that conquest and domination were worthy goals? The very concept seemed alien to their transformed consciousness. Captain Cho Min materialized on the bridge of the flagship without warning or invitation. The Dominion crew stepped back, not from fear, but from recognition of something beyond their understanding. The human captain approached Vexitar directly and studied the former overlord with eyes that had witnessed the rise and fall of civilizations. "You are no longer what you were," Cho Min observed without judgment or condemnation. "The intelligence that built your empire has been surgically removed from your consciousness. What remains is confused and lost, but no longer dangerous." Vexitar looked up at the human with mechanical systems that continued functioning even though their purpose had vanished. "What have you done to me? I remember everything, but I cannot understand why any of it seemed important. My empire meant everything, and now it means nothing. You have been cured of a disease that affects some species." Cho Min explained with genuine compassion. "The need to dominate and consume others is a form of madness that spreads from individual to individual, and civilization to civilization. We have removed that infection from your consciousness." The former overlord struggled to process this information, with augmented intelligence that no longer served any meaningful purpose. "Why did you not simply destroy us? It would have been cleaner and more final than this transformation." Cho Min's response carried the wisdom of species that had faced their own darkness and found redemption, because destruction creates martyrs and generates cycles of revenge. Because every being has the potential for growth and change, because we remember what it was like to be driven by impulses we did not understand. Meanwhile, the coalition refugee fleet finally began to receive good news. Communication channels that had carried only desperation and loss for months suddenly filled with messages of hope. Families separated by the war began reconnecting. Children who had known only evacuation ships started asking when they could go home. Captain Kim Tae coordinated the massive relief effort as human technology made impossible things seem routine. Damaged ships were repaired with methods that bypassed known physics. Wounded beings were healed using techniques that worked at the cellular and quantum level. Entire ecosystems that had been destroyed by Dominion bombardment began regenerating with impossible speed. "Admiral," she reported with amazement that had not faded despite witnessing miracles for hours. "The humans are not just fixing our ships and healing our wounded. They are restoring entire biospheres that were sterilized by Dominion weapons. Planets that were declared dead are showing signs of renewed life." But even as the coalition celebrated their salvation, questions remained about what would happen next. The humans had demonstrated power that made them potentially more dangerous than any threat they had defeated. Their ability to reshape consciousness and reality made them ultimate arbiters of galactic civilization. Kang Hyun posed the question that everyone was thinking. "Captain Cho Min, what are your intentions now that the Dominion threat has ended? Will humanity remain active in galactic affairs or return to your self-imposed exile?" The human captain looked around at the assembled representatives of 7 species and saw the fear hidden behind their gratitude. They needed him to leave almost as much as they had needed him to come. His presence made them uncomfortable with its implications for their independence and free will. "We will return to our isolation as we did after the Precursor War," he said, with the sadness of eternal guardians. "Our nature makes us incompatible with normal galactic civilization. We interfere only when threats arise that conventional military force cannot address. The rest of the time we watch from behind our barriers and hope we are not needed." Park Nari's harmonic voice carried a question that went to the heart of galactic security. How do we know that another Dominion will not arise in the future? How do we prevent this from happening again? Cho Min smiled with an expression that somehow managed to be both hopeful and infinitely tired. "You learn, you grow, you remember what happened here and teach future generations about the price of unchecked aggression. Most importantly, you remain vigilant against the temptation to become what you once fought." He gestured and reality shimmered as dozens of human vessels appeared throughout the system, not warships but vessels designed for healing and restoration. Technology beyond imagination was shared freely with the coalition species, along with knowledge about preventing future conflicts. "We leave you gifts," the captain explained. "Medical, techniques that can heal injuries thought permanent. Terraforming methods that can restore damaged worlds in decades instead of millennia. Communication systems that work across galactic distances instantaneously. Most importantly, we leave you understanding about the warning signs of civilizations that are turning toward the dark path." Commander Lee Day accepted the downloads of information with mandibles clicking in amazement. This technology represents thousands of years of development. Why share it so freely? "Because isolation is not meant to be punishment," Cho Min replied. "Because knowledge shared freely prevents the conditions that create threats requiring our intervention. Because we hope that someday your species will evolve beyond the need for guardians watching from the darkness." As the human fleet prepared to return to Sol space, the quarantine barriers began reforming around their system. But this time, they seemed less like prison walls and more like protective shields around sleeping guardians. Everyone in the coalition fleet understood that they were witnessing something unprecedented in galactic history. Admiral Kang Hyun made his final log entry about the encounter. "Today we learned that sometimes the monsters in the dark are not there to harm us, but to protect us from something worse. We discovered that the most powerful beings in the galaxy are those who choose to limit their own power. And we realized that true strength lies not in the ability to destroy, but in the wisdom to transform." The reformed Dominion territories began the long process of rebuilding as peaceful civilizations. Former soldiers became farmers and engineers. Weapons factories were converted to produce medical equipment and terraforming tools. Children born under the Empire learned new values based on cooperation instead of conquest. Years passed and the galaxy slowly healed from centuries of Dominion expansion. Trade routes reopened. Diplomatic relations were re-established. New alliances formed based on mutual cooperation rather than fear of common enemies. The coalition species shared the technologies gifted by humanity and used them to accelerate recovery throughout known space. But always in the background was the awareness that watchers remained in the darkness around Sol. Beings of immense power who had chosen exile to protect others from their dangerous nature. Guardians who emerged only when conventional force proved insufficient against threats that could consume entire civilizations. The galaxy learned to sleep peacefully, knowing that something watched over them from the quarantine zone where ancient powers dreamed between the stars, and remembered what it meant to be human.